Yes, I found a flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works, so to speak.
And so Ben found out about this, and Ben said, "Oh, no, not on my watch. No, thank you, no ma'am. No, sir, no ma'am." She didn't say it like that. She had a much more eloquent, much more erudite way of saying, this is a way I wanted to protest against them using my own experiences against me and becoming victim to the things that I tried to speak out about.
Hi everyone, this is John Hanson from the Systemic Justice Project and the Flaw magazine at Harvard Law School. This is the second part of our two-part episode on the corporatization of drag. In this second part, Grayce Burns continues her conversation with hosts Sam Perry and Pragya Vela, as Grayce sheds light on how some queens are pushing back to reclaim the activist roots of drag culture, and offers ideas for how we can support local drag performers outside of the drag race monopoly. Welcome to Flaw School, the podcast about the flaws in the law.
In your opinion, how would you assess the overall impact of the show on a queen's career and the queen's financial stability in a broader context? How do they benefit, or how are they harmed financially in the future?
Okay, so this is such a good question because a lot of queens will give you different, I think, feedback in as far as how the show can impact their career, because so much of it is left to like, what do the producers want to show to people? Girl, if you walk on stage and like you fart too loud and a producer decides you're the villain for the season, no matter what you say, it's going to be cut and taken out of context, and you're going to be the villain for the season. And you've seen a lot of queens who've been put in those situations. Jeremy, who used to perform under the name Fifi O'Hara, was kind of famously this antagonist to the season's winner, and was really like ridiculed and bullied and had her career, their career, really derailed afterwards because of the way the producers decided to show this person. And I think you also have people like Tammy Brown, who speak up against a lot of the manipulation going on Drag Race, and who the organization decides to kind of sweep under the rug, while also taking every opportunity possible to reassert their dominance over that person and the art that they've created. So you see this like with Tammy Brown's kind of famous reference to Teletubbies taking us to Mars. I think for the last 2-3 years, RuPaul's DragCon, which is a giant drag convention that happens in California every year now, has been sponsored by the Teletubbies. And RuPaul will never have Tammy Brown back on the show. RuPaul and Tammy Brown, I don't think, have spoken very amiably since that incident. But every opportunity that the organization has to reassert their ownership of Tammy's identity, they have kind of taken to do so, in my opinion. And so I think the effects that the show can have on somebody's career is obviously, giving them the platform, but it is almost kind of a roll of the dice at the end of the day to see who the show decides to portray favorably and who they decide to make look like the worst person who has ever existed, which is impossible because, to my knowledge, Donald J. Trump has never been on Drag Race.
Okay, I was going to save this for later, but I feel like this is such a good time to talk about it. I had a question in mind just about how you mentioned in your piece the producers are actively like making choices to manufacture anger, pain, and hurt among members of the queer community and package it for public consumption. And I'm just going to kind of combine all of what I was thinking into this one question, really getting to an iconic scene that you really highlight and talk about in your piece. And I think we all know we're all talking about Ben's scene on All Stars. Can you explain for people who haven't seen exactly what I'm talking about, and I'll leave it to you to explain more.
No, girl, so here's the tea. Okay, here's where I start yapping. So what happened was, with this season of All Stars, obviously every season of All Stars, the rules change a little bit. What's going on? No one knows. All we know is that RuPaul is going to be there and her hair is going to be taller than I am. And so in this season, in this episode, Ben had been winning challenges left and right. Okay, she was acting, she was dancing, doing the wonderful things that the wonderful Ben de la Creme in and out of drag does as a wonderful performer. In this season, when you won an episode, you had the opportunity to actually pick which of the bottom queens, the worst queens of the week, went home. And you did so by selecting their lipstick, a lipstick with their name on it, which, like, okay, hot take, but is there even lipstick in there? I don't know. But you would show their little lipstick name and be like, this is who I chose to go home. And it was really dramatic because the queens would like hide the lipstick in their breastplate and then like pull it out on stage, and everyone would be like, but what had happened was Ben was choosing between Trixie Mattel and Shangela. And you're wondering like who was going to go home. Both of these queens had very devoted fan bases and were huge personalities and brought a lot to the drag space. And so everyone was kind of on the edge of their seats. Bendela comes out. Whoa, RuPaul says, hey, can I see your lipstick? Weird question to ask, but I guess like given the context, it was fine. Bendela pulls it out. What is that written in shitty whiteout on the lipstick? It's her own name. She eliminated herself. Can you imagine what's going? Dayla, you were literally going to win the whole season. How did you like when this was my Avengers Endgame. This was my Infinity War. When Thanos snaps in the Avengers and everything happens, that's what this was for me when I was like 12 at the time. I was like, I'm going to fall out of my body right now. Everyone was like, what's going on? What's happening? Obviously the producers aren't going to give Ben a 15-minute talking head to be like, and here's why I hate Drag Race, and also RuPaul is ugly, and also I hate all of you. They weren't going to give her that. They weren't going to give her flowers. And we didn't have TikTok, we didn't have Twitter to the degree that we had it today for Ben to go on and be like, listen girls, here's the tea. No, we had to read into it. It was itself a piece of performance art. It was itself a political statement for Ben de la Creme to be like, I'm leaving. And if you know the tea, you know the tea. And Ben didn't talk about, why she left in very exact terms for a long time. But I think as she has kind of become more successful independently in her career, she's been more willing to speak up about the kind of manipulation and injustice that queens on Drag Race go through and why that was such a driving factor for her to leave and to show her own lipstick. So she dipped out. Also, she was wearing like the most iconic like goth girlfriend outfit of all time, which was in itself such a power move. But it was one of the most formative moments of television I have ever watched personally, and I know it was one of the most formative moments of television my cat has ever watched personally also. So big moves made around here.
Thank you. I can't imagine someone giving a better recap of that. Do you feel like Ben was really able to maintain ownership of that scene of kind of like what point that she was trying to get across of why she was leaving, which, before your amazing article was not known to the public. But do you feel like she was able to maintain that ownership over the scene? Do you feel like that was something that was actually manufactured in certain ways that actually took away from Ben's moment?
So when it comes to Ben de la Creme's exit from All Stars, there are a few things that I think came to like mind for me. The first is that going into my conversation with her, it was not something that I wanted to bring up, but it is something that obviously was there because it was such an iconic moment in the Drag Race community for this individual who had been for the majority of the season portrayed as the runaway winner to give it all up. It was something that I thought was obviously very, very brave of her to do. But if you watch the clip of her leaving, you see even in that moment of her deciding to write her own name on the elimination lipstick, how kind of dramatic that moment was made by the producers. there's what, 30, 40 seconds of just like cutting to different drag queens, shocked Pikachu faces. After Ben shows the lipstick, and even like RuPaul in that moment is like, hey, I'm getting my Emmy. I am getting my Oscar nomination. Like RuPaul is living for it, but she's acting like she isn't. Um, and so you have this kind of behind the scenes knowledge of what was going on, which is something I'm very grateful Ben shared with me, because it does really speak to the essence of the piece, um, which is that, she had been talking on different podcasts, different features about how exploited she felt on Drag Race and how she saw other queens just being so manipulated and so, I guess, worn out physically, emotionally, mentally, that she knew she wasn't going to go back to All Stars if she was asked. And this was kind of in the days before that crazy non disclosure agreement where they said, we can force you to do whatever you want for at least 3 seasons of Drag Race, back when queens still had a little bit more agency over their own bodies. Crazy thought. She was really talking to people about how this isn't something that she wanted to continue to support, because of the way queer people were being portrayed through this media that was supposed to uplift people. The producers were just taking the opportunity to say, "Oh, we can win an Emmy by making some gays cry on television. Let's do it." Forgetting that these are real people with real feelings. And so when she was asked to go back on Drag Race, she thought a lot about it, and she talked to me kind of, going through her thought process of, do I go back on the show? Do I not? Because I have this opinion of the show, but at the same time, Drag Race is a monopoly. At the time, there were no other, drag races on television. There were no Boulay Brothers. There were no TikTok for her to use to kind of reach the people, reach her citizenry. She thought, this is kind of what I have to do to stay relevant. And like many people, do I want to go to work every day and show up at 8 a.m.? No, I don't. But this is what I have to do to stay relevant. The people need me. The people need to hear what I have to say as the personality hire. And so that's what Ben did. She went back on the show and was willing to kind of give it another shot. And immediately from the moment she arrived, everyone was like, oh, she came to play. Even with Trixie there, people were like, oh, she came to play. She was doing really well, winning challenge after challenge. And then she realized that the producers, in these kind of confessional behind the scenes moments, were reading her quotes about Drag Race being a monopoly, about Drag Race manipulating queens to other contestants, and asking them to comment on that. What do you think? Do you think it's hypocritical that Ben is here, even though she said that she would never come back on the show? What do you think about that? Obviously the other queens were talking, because who is their allegiance to? Some little tiny producer from Hollywood, some PA, or from like your colleague who you've known for the last 10, 15 years? Yeah, it's to your colleague. The girls are going to yap. And so Ben found out about this, and Ben said, oh, no, not on my watch. No, thank you. No, ma'am. No, sir. No, ma'am. She didn't say it like that. She had a much more eloquent, much more erudite way of saying, this is a way I wanted to protest against them using my own experiences against me and becoming victim to the things that I tried to speak out about. And so that is really, I think, why she chose to leave. She was just, I'm done. I came back here and I thought that I would be able to kind of rewrite a lot of this, or I would be able to just kind of grin and bear it and not get involved in a lot of this, but I'm becoming the kind of person who is manipulated that I wanted to protect in the first place. And so I think that is really what drove her to leave. It's something that, obviously she didn't have the opportunity to explain while it happened. It's something that obviously Drag Race tried to make as dramatic as possible for the wrong reasons. But Ben has continued to be successful despite kind of leaving. That's actually the season that, Trixie Mattel ended up winning. So it's worked out well for everyone. But I think that act of Ben leaving was recognized by other queens. She told me countless people reached out to her, and she felt, even in that moment, though she couldn't control the narrative, she could control the material that they had to work with to build that narrative. And I think she really made a powerful message by doing so.
But I do want to go a little bit meta for a second. I love to talk about systems, and I want to talk about systems with you for a minute. I felt like your article really highlights how corporations have sort of embraced and even like consumed drag to make it something like palatable for a larger audience. Like you said, they've sanitized drag through Drag Race, something they could financially benefit from. And it really made me think about how like our system will modify itself, kind of like mold and blend to kind of whatever sort of showing up in popularity so that it can continue to persist. Because otherwise, whatever this thing is it perceived as a threat to the system, and it could, dismantle the system or significantly change it in ways that those who've been in power over the system are kind of threatened by that. I guess I'm wondering, do you feel like that's sort of what's happened with how the corporate world has interacted with drag? Do you feel like it's really kind of like the system modifying and shaping and bending in order to continue to persist with this kind of thing it sees as a threat on the horizon?
Short answer, yes. Longer yapping answer, definitely. Because here's the thing, here's what had happened. So when a new generation comes into power, I'm thinking intergenerational sovereignty. I'm thinking, one's ability to design their own future for themselves. Obviously, the capitalist corporation is going to try to appeal to as many of those individuals as possible. And living in, this post LGBT rights kind of world, this post Lawrence versus Texas, this post Obergefell world where more and more queer people are being given this thing called human rights. Um, that's becoming something that's like popular among broad communities of people who have the capacity to experience empathy for other people. And so corporations are recognizing that there is an ability to really connect with the consumer by putting Nina West on stage with the Muppets. Um, I'm loving that. Two of my favorite things and favorite people, Kermit the Frog and Nina West, to seeing Bianca Del Rio be featured on a box of Cheerios. Hasn't happened yet, but if that does come to fruition, I will expect a pay cut. So obviously, as people become more appreciative of and accepting of drag cultures and queer communities, more people are feeling like they can be out and proud than before. Corporations are going to see that and they're going to say, oh, people are gay and they like when we like the gays, or at least don't hate them. That equals money. Hello, we love money. So obviously, you see corporations moving into that direction. But like you mentioned, Sam, that also comes with this kind of secondary motivation of this is something that is itself based on critiquing systems of racial, gender, sexual oppression. And it's something that if we embrace and make kind of more uplifted, make more popular, make it seem like we accept, we can control the narrative of. And so that is also a very powerful avenue for people to take. Not saying that I appreciate drag bans, but I am saying that I think drag bans did an amazing thing in reminding a lot of people what the purpose of drag is as a tool for political expression, as a tool for protesting injustices. It's kind of like the Republicans slash conservatives shot themselves in the foot by reminding everyone of what drag is supposed to be, by saying, making up all of these lies about drag queens, making it more difficult for people to dress how they would like to in public. Crazy thought. That, everyone realizes, oh, wait, this isn't just something that you see when you go to a Disney convention with a bunch of puppets on stage. This isn't just like a pantomime to be enjoyed by the public, but it is something that is inherently political, and is something that was kind of conceptualized to drive social and economic change. So I think we've kind of moved back a little bit more towards of a public knowledge of the kind of nature of drag as being inherently a protest. But a lot of the people I talked with in my article spoke a little bit about how difficult it can be to be a drag queen and have these kind of ideas of protesting the government, of protesting the things that the government does because it isn't something that financially benefits you necessarily. So I think there's a lot to be considered there.
Over the years, it seems that drag has taken a turn from challenging oppressive systems created by the government to challenging oppressive systems created by corporations. In addition to Ben's iconic scene that we talked about, could you talk a little bit more about any efforts to push back against these corporations and maintain drag's activist roots?
Sure. So this is something that I was very excited to learn about because it is very much a rising effort within the drag community. Because this is something that really has to start with drag queens. I think the most immediate individual who pops into my mind is Tammy Brown. For a lot of people who are not like too involved in the drag sphere, it can be really surprising to find out that there are now houses and individual designers that people are expected to go to get their outfits made or to get their wigs done. There's actually kind of almost this smaller capitalist sphere of just organizations specifically devoted to providing drag supplies to people. And these can range the gamut from, bespoke designers who charge $10,000 for a gown to popular websites like itemsfordragqueens.com, where items are like suspiciously cheap. It's giving Temu, that sort of thing. And so a lot of queens kind of get their supplies from this little corporate sphere that they themselves exist in. Tammy Brown works exclusively with international designers, with smaller designers that she finds on different social media websites who are creating pieces that she really loves, and she employs them to work specifically for her on the different kind of costumes that she wears. And so I think that's a good avenue to represent this kind of fighting back a little bit about the corporate side of drag that not a lot of people know about, which is like the supply chain of drag. She works exclusively, she tries to find people who are from underrepresented communities, underrepresented socioeconomic backgrounds, and help to uplift them through doing her work. So I think that is a great example of that. I think you have also seen more queens push towards engaging in merchandise that is more sustainable. So something that I talk a little bit about in my piece is this kind of mass market drag merchandise that is sold for the benefit of a queer performer, of a performer from an underrepresented background, but in a lot of cases relies, like a lot of merchandise does, on slave labor, on human rights violations, on supply chain issues. And so I think now you're seeing a lot of queens thinking, okay, I would like to make as much money as possible from selling my merchandise, but who am I hurting by selling this merchandise that is so cheap to acquire, and who can I benefit? So while right now I think a lot of the talk has been focused on where drag queens choose to get their items and their materials and costumes from, hopefully a lot of the discussion will push back a little bit more on corporations. And I think a few queens are really leading that charge vocally, mostly on social media right now, outside of the supply chain sphere.
You mentioned this much earlier, but I feel like this is a good time to kind of come back to people who are just kind of coming to this episode, want to listen because they love law school or they're just interested in drag. I guess like I'm wondering, do you feel like larger public audiences have recognized the monopoly that Drag Race has over drag, or they just really see it as this kind of entity, this show that like is great and really enjoy, but don't see it as a monopoly?
This question reminds me of the Despicable Me Minion memes that your mom shares on Facebook, and I'm going to tell you why. So there are largely two groups of people who are sharing these memes. The first is, I'm doing this because I genuinely believe that these little yellow guys are hilarious. Are they speaking French? Are they speaking Italian? I don't know. Where do they get their overalls? I would love to know. And I think that's kind of the first camp of people who aren't necessarily awoken to the idea that drag race is a monopoly because they are just now starting to appreciate drag race, just now starting to get into it. in this group, again, I think the Venn diagram actually between people who unironically share Minion memes on Facebook and who don't realize that Drag Race is a monopoly is a perfect circle, because it is like your 55-year-old mom who is just now starting to realize that slay is a word that people are saying. And then in the other camp, you have people who are sharing the Minion memes. Ironically, they're like, these little yellow guys are so camp. Like, they're slaying their boots in the house down. Can I be one of them? I would love to be a little yellow minion guy and just like not even have to speak English. No thoughts, head empty. My name is Kevin or Todd or Mike or like some white guy name or whatever. Um, and that is where I think the people who know that Drag Race is a monopoly exist. They're kind of watching Drag Race because they recognize that this is an avenue for queer expression, but you have a point now where the Drag Race viewer is no longer, engaging with the show at face value, but is watching it critically and engaging with other people online and talking about the kind of critical avenues behind Drag Race. Tempest talked a little bit about this, about how, when other smaller, albeit drag performers and avenues for expression came on the scene, like the Boulet Brothers Dragula, she was like, oh, thank God, something that isn't Drag Race. Like, other avenues for experiencing drag are becoming more popular, especially because of the type of drag that Drag Race has elevated to being this archetype of drag. And so I think, again, to bring it back to the Minion memes, those two camps are one day going to meet, and it's going to be a beautiful coming together of people who might have different ideas on what the minions mean to them, but it's going to lead to a broader change within the Despicable Me universe and the Drag Race universe as a whole.
Now that we've talked about the awful exploitation and detriments caused by the corporatization of drag, what can we do about it? How can we, as members of the public, help queens combat the unethical, harmful practices that have persisted through these practices?
That is such a good question, Pranya. I think the first, like Lady Bunny mentions, is to support your local drag queens. Go out, go to the tiny gay bars. If you're an ally, go to these shows for smaller queens. Give them your money directly. Give them your doll hairs. Support the girls. I think also going out of your way, if you're not able to go to these shows in person, you can go and watch some of these lesser known queens online. Whatever you can do to cut out the middleman between you and the performer is really, I think, what is going to be the best way for you to support some of these girls. And when you're making your daily shopping decisions, what kind of makeup should I buy? What kind of paper towel should I buy? Hey, support your local drag queen. If she's selling reusable, handmade, artisan paper towels, go and buy some paper towels from her. Go and buy your makeup from Trixie Cosmetics. Do whatever you can to get more money to the places that you know where it's going and where you want it to go, instead of going to the faceless individuals behind Drag Race and Paramount Plus.
I love that. And so not only thinking about what people should do, but where can people go to learn more about like the queens that you talk about in this piece, your favorite queens, anything you think anyone should know. I mean, you have a wealth of knowledge about drag very clearly based on this episode and Drag Race, and we need to know, where do we get the information that we need?
Thanks for asking, Sam. I always love when people ask me questions about what I think, because I love to gap. First recommendation is my article on the flaw. Had to write that as a class requirement, but somewhere along the line, it became so much more than that, and I would be thrilled to share that with the world. I think another place you can go is support any of the queens that took the time to chat with me. I'm talking Tammy Brown. I am talking Tempest du Jour. I'm talking Benda La Creme, and I am talking the incomparable Lady Bunny. If you want to wake up, you go to Lady Bunny's Instagram, okay? Because she might be a drag queen, but she is also a 50-year-old man, and she posts like it, okay? She is like if my dad woke up. So if you want to learn a little bit, go to their Instagrams, their TikToks, chat with them, go out of your way to support them. And I think something that I would love everyone to know is buy Ginger Minge's cookbook, because that thing goes off, and it does not have any business going as hard as it does, but that cookbook has some absolutely iconic recipes in it. And you look at Ginger Minge and you're like, yeah, she's a little heavy, but like maybe she's good at cooking too. And she is. She is. So go and support Ginger Minge by buying her cookbook.
You've honestly sold me. I am a meal prep girl. I love to look for recipes. I'm game. But I hate to say this. It seems like we have reached our time today. I have 1,000 more questions in my head, but I don't know if everyone wants to sit through them for the rest of the day. Um, Grayce, thank you so much for joining us on Flaw School. We are so happy to talk with you, not only about drag race, the highs and lows of law school, but really anything else that comes into your head, because I feel like whatever you just say, I just find myself laughing with you, not at you, and I love it so much. So thank you for being on the episode.
Thank y'all for having me. Happy to talk anytime.
Grayce, I also want to just say thank you for a wonderful conversation. I feel like there's so many different aspects of this topic, from the benefits to the abuse, and we are so incredibly grateful for you for raising awareness of this topic.
And thank you, Pragya, for being a great co-host. Your questions, I feel like, have just been incredibly thoughtful, and it's just been such a pleasure to talk with you as well today.
Of course. Sam, I feel like you're so well-spoken. You are an amazing, amazing person, and I'm so grateful I got to do this with you. If you're interested in reading Grayce's full article or learning more about the flaws in our legal system, go check out the Flaw magazine at theflaw.org.
And if you enjoyed this episode, which if you made it this far, I hope you did, because otherwise I don't know why you're still listening. First, just make sure to check out the show notes. I know we're going to put some links into some of the amazing queens that have been discussed today, but some other resources as well. And make sure to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also check out flawschool.org for more amazing content. Thank you all for listening and letting us talk at you today, and looking forward to doing that some more.
And a special thanks to Mireille for helping us out and being an amazing technical director and pretty much running the show behind the scenes.
And with that, class is officially dismissed.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Flaw School. Our theme music is by Crystal Squad, and you also heard Palms Down from Blue Dot Sessions.